Think spring, think size jokes. All this and more coming up on This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Let's compare our Willys. A review of nearly all Jet Set Willy games.
Retro coding Roundup. Use shiny new hardware to write up-to-date programs for out-of-date tech.
QUOD Damage. Someone's made a Quake-like game using only 64 kilobytes of memory.
And Star Wars TIE Fighter news, along with a new Exo Retro Mega Pack coming up on this week's show for the week of Saturday, the 7th of March, 2026.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. I can't tell you how excited I am, and I'm excited for Chris as well, because ask us why we're so excited, Dave.
Lots of people are excited for me, apparently.
Why are you so excited, Jason?
Because with the return of daylight savings time in the US next week, Chris and I get 1/2 hour back in our morning/evening, respectively.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which means now that all of
together.
Yes, all of the mistakes that we now make, we can't chalk up to fatigue or lack of sleep anymore. But it's been a long winter, folks.
I was looking at the show recording schedule, and it's half an hour early for me, and then it jumps to an hour later for me just because of the way it all works. But yeah, I'm never a problem because it's right in the middle of the day for me, so it's always fine. It's you guys that have the sharp end of the stick. Aside from that, though, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good. Ready for bed.
No guest this week. Hopefully not a show that's 50% too long this week.
God, that was,
Still loads and loads to cover, though.
Let's get into it.
If you look at the history of video games, of home video games, you'll find at the tail end of the 70s and into the 80s, they were mostly just mirroring what you'd play in the arcade, or at least trying to. Single screen stuff, perhaps progressing through a set of different single screens and then back to the start. So in Galaga, for example, you'd have a single screen with a wave of enemies, then you go into a different wave or a bonus wave, but it would be essentially the same thing on repeat. Or in Donkey Kong, you'd progress through different platform levels, but ultimately go back to the same at the start. Or in Yar's Revenge, took that a little bit further, but still fundamentally the same idea, a loop of gameplay through a linear progression in series of these screens. Games like E.T. and Pitfall changed that a little. They put their toes in the water of letting you go on a real adventure, of letting you explore, giving you a bit of agency. And of course, before all this, we had text adventures, but they really did feel like a different kettle of fish to the video games we've talked about so far, really quite, at this point, quite distant from each other. But 1984 is where I think it all broke loose. I'm going to mention 3 games here that I think have one key thing in common, a sense of adventure, a sense of exploration, and they gave the player agency to go in the direction that they wanted. And the first, and we'll come back to this at the end because it's actually the point of this segment, is Jet Set Willy. It's the sequel to Manic Miner, but unlike Manic Miner, you don't progress through each screen in turn without any choice what's next. And you don't even have to complete a screen by collecting all the items to progress. You could come back to the screen to do it later, or you could just pass through it on the way to somewhere else. You take on the role of Willy, and you explore your massive 60-room mansion, ostensibly to collect items, although I think, like me, most people spent a lot of time just wandering around and exploring. Each room had its own name, and some were quite kind of creative and evocative and thought-provoking. Others were just simple, like the ballroom, for example. Over in the USA, though, they had Montezuma's Revenge. Now, at its heart, it's a similar game. You are Panama Joe, who is no relation at all to Indiana Jones, completely legally distinct. Panama Joe is in a multi-layered pyramid with colour-coded locks and keys, trying to get to the treasure chamber. Now, it wasn't quite as adventurous and descriptive as Jet Set Willy, but the actual gameplay was probably a step further ahead. There was inventory management, and the movement and jumping felt a bit more realistic than Jet Set Willy, although realistic is maybe not a word that easily lends towards this game. Staying in the USA, we also have King's Quest. Now, this really is a text adventure at its core, but it's been put inside a graphical skin, and that was what was needed to elevate it above the text adventure genre, which at the time was starting to wane, and it wasn't as accessible or eye-catching for younger players. But King's Quest, of course, was. You play Sir Graham through Daventry, collecting items and dying in annoying ways, and dying in ways that you might have seen coming, and dying in ways that you didn't see coming. The addition of simple graphics turned what really is a text adventure at its core into something completely different. And it bridges the gap between what we had with arcade games and adventure games. And in fact, that's what all of these have done. They've taken basic arcade game concepts, they've added an element of exploration, of choice, of adventure. And that's what I love in games. I love adventure, I love discovering things. So this is right up my alley. But these three aren't the only games in this sudden 1984 awakening of adventure. There is loads of stuff in the same year. There's Elite, a space trading adventure where you can go where you want. Saber Wolf, Underworld, and Night Lore, a trilogy of games with 256, 579, and 128 rooms in each. Massive. The School Days, a rather unusual game where you're going through a day at school. The Lords of Midnight, a game we talked about recently. It's a game which mixes text adventure with graphics to give you a sense of adventure and position. There's Impossible Mission, searching and decoding things as a platformer. There's Wanted Monty Mole, the first in that series where you took on the role of a mole, mostly in a hole, with the goal of retaining control of your coal, avoiding patrols with that famous jump and roll.
Did you enjoy that?
Very, very much so.
We're proud of you too. There are some pre-1984 Atari 2600 games that I think are worth keeping in mind as we talk about this. I mean, there's the Adventure cartridge, which really was a very early, not strictly open world, but yeah, it's pretty open worldy. Superman, which was essentially a reskin of that Adventure engine. Haunted House, and all of these are coming out before 1984. And then you get into the Raiders of the Lost Ark game and Riddle of the Sphinx, which were kind of two different approaches on this. What if there's an adventure in Egypt that involves inventory management on an Atari 2600? Sword Quest Earthworld, which was very elaborate and also apparently extremely unfair. I'm relieved to find out as a middle-aged man, and then E.T., as you mentioned. I want to make an honorable mention here, too, and see if you guys can think of another example of this. Did you ever play the 1982 arcade game Bagman?
Nope.
Okay. So you are a crook, complete in striped prisoner outfit, and you're running around and you're picking up bags of loot that you're trying to get back to your wheelbarrow and out, and you're running away from guards. And it's worth taking a look at because I believe it's the earliest action-oriented game I can think of where an object that you have to collect, you have to get those loot sacks, but it's a hindrance. It slows you down when you're carrying it, although you can use it as a weapon to drop on the guard. But like picking it up it's not just like a Pac-Man power pellet where it's only good news. So I think it counts as, it's not really inventory management in a sophisticated way, but I think it's above that Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, the power-up's only a good thing for you. And then where do you put the original Castle Wolfenstein, 1983, in this? Because it's arcadey, but it's got resource collecting, resource management, stealth. Yeah, it's sort of a third-person stealth shooter.
Ideally, I would put it 1 year later than it really came out and then claim it was part of this 1984 thing. Because, I mean, obviously there wasn't this door that opened in 1984 and suddenly you could do things you couldn't before. It's not as cut and dried as I'd like it to be. And the elements that we saw in 1984 were floating around and being tested at before it.
I think you kind of hit on, when you talked about the transition from the arcade, those, you can see where designers are taking more time to think about what does it mean if somebody's just made a discrete purchase for this game and wants to play it. We're not trying to mine a new coin out of them every 2 minutes.
Yeah, nor do we want a 5-minute experience at most. We want them to sit down and play for longer. So that's what we started to see. This is, of course, the transition into that. And that's what we started to see. But 1984, I think, is where you can say this is the big year of it all happening. And yeah, I think that's when the explosion, I stand by that. That's when the explosion happened. But the reason why I'm talking about this today is a submission to the subreddit from, well, it's me. I submitted this. And it's a great video from Retro Gamer Diaries reviewing 31 different versions of this game, Jet Set Willy. 31 different ports of this game. That's how it's a testament to not just how popular the game was, but also it's a testament to how everyone thought they could release an 8-bit micro in the 80s and be a success. Covers all sorts of platforms.
Did it include the Australian version, Dave, which was created by It's My Thyroid using an editor? Because, that's the best version out there.
No, it didn't, unfortunately. No, it didn't. Of course, if it had, there'd be no point covering the other ones because that's clearly the best ever. It had the awful Amiga versions, and they really should be seen, the Amiga versions. This is someone saying, the Amiga's got so much more to do than the Spectrum, so we have to make the game different. And it's zoomed in and scrolling with horrible music. Terrible. There are the original Spectrum versions and the upgraded Amstrad version, and then back to the Spectrum, but all sorts in there. When the game, this is something I like about it, when the game was ported to the Amstrad CPC, instead of the usual 60 rooms, it was cleverly coded with new tricks like compression and ended up with over 130 rooms, including taking Willy into space, spacesuit included, and was so popular that it ended up being ported back to the Spectrum again as Jet Set Willy 2. Now, the CPC version is the one I played, and because of the larger room count and how far you could travel, from the start, it really was an adventure. Each room was different. Each room felt different. It really was an adventure. I think I'll go into space and making my way all the way up to space and taking off in a rocket. I'd like to say that Jet Set Willy is a fantastic, timeless game where pixel-perfect, fixed-length jumps make you so precise with what you're doing that it's difficult to platform but rewarding, but you can just explore and you can try to complete it or even just try to reach a room further away than last time. But it is impossible for me to say because it's my first adventure. This is the first game like this. It's the first time I really did enjoy what has defined not just my retro habits, but also the type of books I enjoy the most, the films I like the most, the TV series I like the most. I want to explore a strange new world. But it's the first one that I played like this, and it's the game that got me onto playing RPGs, point-and-click, text adventures, and all things in between. So I love this game so much, and it was the first adventure game that I played that I have absolutely no ability to objectively judge if it's good or not. I can only be subjective on it. But what I think the video shows is that for the most part, the game is playable on any platform, assuming you avoid the few poor ports that there are. I would happily die on the hill that the CPC is the best place to play it, not just because of the wonderful rendition of Moonlight Sonata on the title screen, but because it doesn't have the Spectrum bugs, and they've not tried to do something weird like they did with the Amiga version. On the other hand, maybe it's unfair to take anything away from the Spectrum because the Spectrum is the original home of this, and it's such a Spectrum game. It's not really pushing the hardware, but it doesn't need to. It's just a comfortable game there. So I wanted to ask you guys, do you have any experience with Jet Set Willy? And more importantly, what was your first adventure? What's the first game that you really felt that sense of exploration in? Chris?
I didn't actually play Jet Set Willy back in the day. I've only played it recently. And the It's My Thyroid Australian version was fantastic because he basically flipped everything upside down. Because it's Australia, right? And then he renamed some of the rooms to be places around Perth. So it was such a cute little thing. And we actually ran that out to tape. So that's with the roaming Spectrum that will be auctioned off to charity. There's a cassette copy of that going with that bundle. But the first time I felt like I was on an adventure, and Jason's going to hate me with this, and I know we're not talking about text adventures, but it was Sphinx Adventure on the Acorn Electron. I think that's the first game I played that went beyond, like you were saying, Dave, the single screen, whether it be a platformer or a shooter or whatever.
Chris, I don't hate you for it. My heart goes out to you for it.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. But
you have to agree, though, if that's all you have, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it wonderful, but yeah, that's all I have. So that's that. Still haven't finished it. Luke, get onto it. But in terms of the kind of genre of game that we're talking about here, it would be Auf Wiedersehen Monty on the Spectrum. That's the version of that from that franchise that I played on my Plus 3. And fantastic game. And like I say, just so big, so expansive. And lots of different ways to go through, and you end up going back to the same rooms to then progress further and whatever. And I would also bundle in on this, I think, actually, Attic Attack. Yeah, maybe to a point. But The Great Escape on the Spectrum as well. Really good game. Apparently, once you know the path to take to escape, and there are several ways of escaping, you can get through it quite quickly. But I never escaped, and it really did feel like you were on a journey and trying to, bribe people with chocolate and avoid the guards and all of that kind of stuff, and work out if you could just make a run for it, which of course you couldn't. Great game, fantastic, and the game just let you explore and work it out. Loved it.
Jason.
So
be nice to Jet Set Willy.
Well, so it was not sold here, so far as I can tell. But despite that, nope.
Amazing.
But I did it
on everything. If you had a platform in the UK, it was released for it.
No, I know, and so I did it for you, Dave. For the many thousands out there who follow our adventures each week, for all of you, I did finally play a round of Jet Set Willy, which I've been led these many years to believe is a game without compare. I played it on my brand new C64 Ultimate. Let's see if I can get the gesture. Nice. Even a sort of maiden voyage for my new old computer. So my two takeaways: it does compare pretty closely to Melbourne House's Dark Tower, which was a game that was published later, but which was sold here. And I mean, Jet Set Willy, it's fine. For this kind of item collecting, running, jumping, timing kind of experience, for me, Bruce Lee is still where it's at. A game published, by the way, in 1984. Its puzzle mechanics seem just as good to me. Plus, you're Bruce Lee and you get to kick ninjas into razor blade traps. So that seems better. As far as like first adventure experiences, those notable Atari 2600 carts, Adventure, Raiders, E.T., which, by the way, E.T. is a good game. You just need to do a little bit of reading the manual and a bit of, I'm a player of early games, so I got to do a little problem-solving intuition thing regarding the pit collision bug. Raiders was super hard, but with the clue book, it was at least a pleasure to explore and make progress in. And then I mentioned Sword Quest Earthworld, which was my cousin Erica's cart. And she and I spent countless hours trying to make any sort of progress on that stupid thing. And I guess I feel better knowing now that it was almost impossible to do. I'll also lob in there, Pitfall 2 comes out in 1984. And that one's really notable because in order to make it do all the things it could do on the Atari 2600, they actually put an extra chip on the cartridge itself. We are doing this. We are going to bring this amped up adventure to the 2600. Like that's how big this drive, to your point, Dave, in the industry to really expand on adventures was. And I think Pitfall 2, with the action and music and the fun checkpoint system, that probably would be my answer to what was that first game that felt like a grand adventure, because it had that full, felt like the full degrees of motion. You're falling, you're swimming, you're climbing up on helium balloons. Like there was a lot of there in Pitfall 2. So that might be what was the first one that really captured that feel.
Yeah. I've traveled to various different places in the world and I've seen things, and I still would rate exploring a new world in a book or a film or a game up in with those. It's so important to me. And this is 1984 is when it all of a sudden happened, when games really said, we need to give the players an adventure type experience. Again, there's no line in the sand. I wouldn't want people to say that if it came out before 1984, it didn't exist. Of course there was there. But yeah, this is where it all started. And you can see it now. In modern games, there is still adventure, exploration. They talk about environmental storytelling. I love environmental storytelling. But finding little hidden things that enhance the story that are not in any way necessary, all those things are there. And if you look back to it in 1984, I think is when it first started. No relation to the novel, of course. The novel's all grim and miserable. And thankfully, this is all good stuff. So have a look at the review of Jet Set Willy. It's compelling. It's not just a boring review. He talks a lot about the game, kept me going throughout the whole thing. It's a great video. Go and give it a watch. And if you want, go and play Jet Set Willy, the Australian edition, upside down from It's Me Thyroid.
I haven't been so excited for a sponsor segment in a long time because they said it couldn't be done. They said that this trio would not last longer than issue 32 of Pixel Addict magazine. They were wrong. Issue 33 has just hit the printers. It will be available to order soon. No longer do we have to hear Dave try to sound excited. Try and succeed to sound excited about the death of dial-up. No. The feature story for issue 33 is all about gremlin graphics. How did a company with such a cool image that could deliver such great games start out. Pixel Addict takes a walk down memory lane with Gremlin co-founder Ian Stewart to find out. Plus, there are chats with Sean Southern, Chris Shrigley, Simon Phipps, and other Gremlin greats. Nobody's heard any of this stuff before. They haven't heard Dave say this 8 times because this is a new issue. Tell them about the other features, Dave.
Who's on the cover, though? Who's on the cover?
I don't know.
It's Monty
You
Mole.
tell them.
Oh,
It's Monty
Great.
Mole.
Fine.
It's the mole in the hole.
Another
The
game we
goal.
didn't have here.
There's other things. The review of Terminator 2D, No Fate. There's loads of other stuff. In fact, there's a review of the new Commodore 64 Ultimate, which I think is fantastic. I love mine. Do you like yours?
I do. It's about what I was hoping for, and I didn't have any. Mine's the basic model. It doesn't have any of the weird flex issues. I wonder which model they review in Pixel Addict issue 33, which is a new issue of Pixel Addict.
You'd have to buy it to find out. Where would you?
You
go
would
buy
have
it?
to. I would go to addict.media.
Yeah, and you can have it delivered through your door, or you can have a PDF copy. This was an unintentionally competent sponsor section, Pixel Addict. I hope we haven't disappointed you by being competent for once.
I'm full of excitement. Let's keep that rolling. Believe it or not, my story starts out this week with a reference to a racing game. So back on the Commodore 64, it was fairly easy to obtain disk sector editors. So these are programs that let you look directly at the data stored in each 256-byte sector on a disk. Among other things, the very popular Epix Fastload cartridge had a sector editor in its ROM. You can go into a menu and just kind of poke around at a disk. And I would spend hours and hours just digging through disks, sector by sector, to see what I might find. I mean, sometimes you find nothing at all. There's nothing, human readable unless you really know what you're looking at. Sometimes you find very useful game data stored in plain text, like all the link codes and passwords for the bulletin boards in Neuromancer. That was fun. And then sometimes you'd find little messages hidden by the developers, as in the case of Test Drive from Accolade, which actually has a lot of messages, including in the very first sector on the back of the disk. Test Drive was programmed by Kevin P. Pickle and written on an Amiga cross-assembler. 64s are too slow. Hello to all you hackers out there. September 23rd, 1987, 5:54 p.m. at Burnaby, near Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. And wow, I mean, Kevin, very specifically, with a lot of specific detail, waving hello to me and specifically everybody else who thought to do the same thing generally. And the point of all of this is learning that the test drive for the Commodore 64 was actually coded up on an Amiga. So, think about this. Like, one of the features of the early wave of personal computing was the idea that you could write, use, and even sell things that you created for that platform on the platform itself. That was kind of one of the hooks. So if you were a kid, you might not have any particular reason to know that it was actually very common in all sorts of software industries to develop on one computer and run it on another. You might not realize it for some time because, even a stock 1987 Amiga is going to have substantially more processing power, memory, storage than a C64. So writing your test drive source code there, compiling, bringing it across to test on a C64, that's going to be faster and more convenient than writing and compiling on the 64 itself. Using a separate and often unrelated development machine for consoles was always standard practice because consoles aren't really optimized for keyboard I/O, and until recently they weren't optimized for things like local storage either. Tools for cross-compiling for retro platforms are only getting better today. So did you guys ever do any of this kind of like hunting around on disks, poking through the sectors or whatever? And when did you learn that very big and sometimes very unfun, mini computers and mainframes were actually what was used to code up a lot of arcade and console games?
I'll answer this the wrong way around, but I know that the Oliver twins, for example, they use an Amstrad CPC and they got someone to make a device to squirt the code into a Spectrum. So they use an Amstrad CPC 6128, not the most powerful computer in the world by any means, but enough to make them able to bedroom code for a Spectrum or other machines and use it to squirt it on. I know other people use the Tatong Einstein, and people used Atari STs. I know that Jason from the Dev Den in the Cave uses an Atari ST as a development machine. People, as you said, used Amiga. People use PCs, all sorts of things. And it kind of makes sense to use, if you take one step and say, okay, use a machine to write the code and then squirt it into another one, as soon as you're putting it through an RS-232 cable, then it doesn't need to be the same computer at all. So all of a sudden, it doesn't need to be a C64 to code in a C64. So that makes sense. But as for hunting around disks, I didn't do that, but I did nearly that. And this is what I used. This is a Romantic Robot Multiface 2. It's for the Amstrad CPC. And it is absolutely magical. It's such an important device for me and my Amstrad. Back when I got the Amstrad, we got the CPC 6128, which was the disc-based machine, the 3-inch disc-based machine. And in the UK, as I'm sure people are aware, we use tapes for games. So much so that if you wanted to get an Amstrad CPC disc version instead of the tape version, instead of $9.99 for the tape version, it was $14.99 for the disc version. A $5 to get it on disc, which was it felt like a rip-off. On top of that, the $1.99 and $2.99 budget games that we got, they didn't come on discs either. In France and Spain, apparently, though, for the Amstrad CPC, they did a disc with 3 or 4 games on it, and that was a great thing, but we didn't get that back in the UK. So what this did was, the primary function that I bought this for was to freeze a game and save it to disc. So I could load in the tape version and then save it to disc, and then in the 4 or 5 discs that I had a rotating collection of what I was playing at that moment, and I could just load them back in from disc. Now, this existed. I think the Action Replay is what you would call that on the Commodore 64, and the original Multiface was on the Spectrum. This existed in lots of machines, but that was the primary function for me, moving tape things onto disc, and it was great. You could actually use it for piracy, but I didn't actually use it for piracy. Not until the ST was when I was a big pirate. But the thing it did, though, was allowed you to explore the memory of it. So you loaded a game in, and you could sift through the memory, and it would show you the hexadecimal code, but also the ASCII equivalent. And just like what Jason was talking about, going through a disc, you could do that with a game like Runestone, for example. I could go through there searching for answers in a text adventure so that I could then type in what the game was expecting. Or you could go through, and you could, if you wanted to, cheat. If you were clever enough to look for numbers changing, you could cheat that way. But yeah, I searched through and looked for bits of text. And like Jason, I can't remember what I found, but I did find the odd little message from the developer in there. And it was like going on an adventure looking through the text of a game there. So this is the Multiface 2. I absolutely loved it. Fantastic device. Huge part of my history with the CPC.
No, not much from me, but I do find the whole thing of, let's call them Easter eggs, fascinating, and you get them not just in games, but also in software suites like Microsoft Office and stuff like that, where the developers have. It just feels cheeky that they've put these little messages in there for the consumer to stumble across, and some of them, I don't know how you would accidentally stumble across them unless you knew to go to cell 99 in an Excel spreadsheet and put in whatever, and then find yourself walking through a Doom-esque landscape. Get to the other side of that and you get photos of the devs. Who's going to stumble across that? But I just love it that they do this kind of thing. So it's nice to know that they were doing it even back in the days of C64 discs and just putting it on the boot sector. That's cool.
Yeah. So this cross-compiling trend continues as Pajako6502 linked us this week to a video from the Retro Shack with the lurid headline, Node and Flow Programming for the ZX Spectrum? What sorcery is this? So the video is an overview of a system currently in development by a fellow calling himself Indigo Beetle, who self-describes as, quote, I'm an old school game and technology creator with a passion for retro, unquote. And I say unquote because you're not here. You can't read where the quote ends and I continue. That's for you, commenter. And Indigo Beetle is the one who cooked up this visual flow-based programming system, which does indeed run on contemporary Windows, Mac, and Linux systems and outputs code to the 48K Spectrum. The system, somewhat unfortunately, is named Quwyll, spelled K-W-Y-L-L, and I say unfortunately because this is a complete namespace collision with a different game creation system, by the way, also available for the Spectrum, called the Quwyll, normal English spelling, which runs on native micros and generates text adventures, but that's what Indigo Beetle chose, so we'll run with it. Dave.
That cannot be an accident. You can't not know about the Quwyll if you're doing this.
You'd think, and maybe Indigo Beetle will explain himself. But
I don't think it's a terrible idea. I think it's a bit of fun calling it this. Homage to it. Well, the new Quwyll system is currently available on sale for pre-release early adopters for $10 whole American over on itch.io. The idea the price will triple when the software reaches version 1.0. This Quwyll system is still in active development. As I write this, there was a new minor revision pushed like just hours ago, and there were other updates in each of the 2 previous weeks. Indigo Beetle has created a lot of demo videos explaining how the different tools in the suite works, from the graphics creation to those
cool flow-based modules that govern the game logic. And that's good because often these toolkits are extremely useful for their creators, but they don't always translate to a wider audience. And he published a simple but rock-solid platform puzzle game called Santa's Lost and Found using this Quwyll system. And he's documented how he created it in a video. And the Santa project source code is also available to game purchasers. So you don't have to just guess at how he did it or, piece it together through the video. You can look at the flow modules yourself in the Quwyll editor to understand how it all comes together. So, Indigo Beetle is positioning this as a way to create Spectrum games and programs for non-coders. You guys have any interest? Or did you ever use any of the classic game-making kits to any significant degree?
No interest at all in doing this myself. I think it's interesting, but I have come to terms that I'm not a creative person and I shouldn't be trying to force myself to do programming because I have 101 different things to do at any minute of time. I've never been bored in my life. I've always got something else that I need to do and something else that I want to do. So I also appreciate at my elderly age, I shouldn't be forcing myself to do things that I don't want to do when I don't have enough time to read all the books I want to see all the TV, to listen to all the audio plays. I don't have time to do things, so I won't do this. But I do love the idea of making a kind of simple games accessible to people.
I definitely find this interesting because I like the idea of creating games and I like the idea of doing it with minimal coding. So this is aimed at people like me, I believe. And yeah, in terms of stuff that I used in the past, shoot 'em up construction kit, which is okay to a point, quite limited. And in the same way, 3D construction kit, for your Freescape engine style games. So it was all good fun. In fact, I would like somebody that knows how to code a system like this to revisit things like shoot 'em up construction kit, because it doesn't need much added to it to actually make that actually quite good and powerful. So maybe somebody can reverse engineer a package like that and make it better. Or maybe what I should actually do is learn how to use Amos. I mean, there is that as well.
I in my head, I'm like, I think the next evolution of that is Amos. So
Yeah.
Yawning Angel, hello.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the acronym Quwyll, we have to point out what the acronym for Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit is. Someone say it.
Schmuck.
Suck.
It is suck. Yeah.
Yeah. No accident, I'm sure.
Yeah. It kind of did.
So along these same lines, I came across a post on a different subreddit, r/retro game dev, and I cross-posted it to our subreddit. And this one was originally from r retro hacking mod 2, and it's a link to a blog post from a couple of months ago, and it acts as a catalog of open source game engines, and these are specifically for retro consoles rather than computers, leaning more heavily into the 16 and 32-bit era, things like the Sega Genesis, TurboGrafx 16, rather than the earliest of the early, although things like Game Boy Color are in there. And it does run through to what I guess we'll call the reasonably modern era, original Xbox, both flavors of PlayStation Portable, even the Nintendo GameCube and Wii hardware platforms. And this list is almost certainly not exhaustive. And indeed, somebody replied to the original post with an interesting multi-platform emulator called Mason, which apparently has great debugging capabilities for software developers. But if you're looking for a place to start developing for a classic console, or to flip it around, if you wanted to browse through a menu of options and kind of find the open source development engine which you think best fits your skills, that might guide you to the best platform for your talents, looks like a terrific place to start. And by the way, although the focus of this new Quwyll, as well as the engines documented in this blog post, they do focus on graphical, visual, action-oriented games. If your inclination is more in that text adventure genre, there are several solid modern options out there to create both pure text and graphics adventures for older platforms. There's Puny Inform that lets you write Infocom-style Z-Machine games, but with a lightweight library that still runs on the lowest spec machines like the Atari 800 and Commodore 64. There's a newer language called Dialogue. That development is being revived with new development, and it offers some conveniences that aren't found in Puny Inform. Adventure On remains really popular for text graphics adventures, and there are also some side systems out there like Lantern from Evan Wright. And you can even code up games compatible with the original Scott Adams system if you are so inclined.
Yeah, I love how accessible all this stuff is. And I think when you look at what is being homebrewed, what's coming out from people, it tends to be more focused on the 8-bits because that's something that you can feel you can do to completion without it being overwhelming. if you try to do a complete 16-bit game, I mean, I look at the development of Seconoid from Hoffman, and the amount of effort that took him from someone who really knows what he's doing to start off with to make this is enormous. So an 8-bit game is something that's doable for people to make, whereas a 16-bit game is more difficult, and anything more than that, you're relying on things like Unity and so on to make it, rather than getting down to the bones of it. So these are ideal. It's fantastic you can do this. And I mean, I said this before, the theme of this is adventures. I love adventures, so someone able to make adventures here, something they have in their head and get it through to a game without the modern way of a committee having to decide everything, then yeah, this is interesting to be what they might come up with.
Although the passage of time does necessarily close off some of the potential audience for your games, the longer you wait, the more likely it is that either official development tools get leaked, or some all-singing, all-dancing modern suite, or both, will end up being out there for your classic platform of choice. And hey, if you have already coded something up for one of these systems or plan to start, please do tell us about it on the subreddit, r/thisweekinretro. Tell us about it in the comments.
This week's top submission, this is in housekeeping, not briefs, is from Pajako wishing Duncan a happy 50th birthday. And there were loads of comments on YouTube too. So thank you for everybody who did that. I'm sure it put a smile on old, ancient Duncan's face.
And we want to thank Bullion Boy and Lars, both of which converted from monthly Patreon supporters to annual. Please have a look at patreon.com/thisweekinretro at your monthly and annual participation options. And we've got our new surprise for March coming up, where we take on some top 5 games we'd want to have in a dire circumstance. So that'll be our March feature.
On to news and briefs now. Galdiri links us to a video of the TIE Fighter Total Conversion. This is a massive fan-made overhaul project that ports the entire 1994 classic TIE Fighter into the 1999 X-Wing Alliance engine, and then runs it on the X-Wing Alliance upgraded engine, which is a modern remake of that engine. The end result is nothing short of magical. We covered it years ago on here. I was blown away. It's enhanced now. They're getting more and more things in HD. So the concourse, the bit you go to between missions, is now in high definition. There's a better stability in the game because they've moved things to 64-bit. There's a better installer. Look at the video. It's absolutely incredible. I'm not just blowing smoke up it. This is absolutely amazing what they've done. TIE Fighter in 1994 is peak gaming for me. It's an absolutely fantastic game, and this takes it up to a new level. This is absolutely incredible.
And I've mentioned this before. My very first reported story here was a G7 VFY piece about FreeDOS, and he's back with more stuff about FreeDOS, saying we should reject Windows, return to DOS. Linked us to a video from Inkbox on FreeDOS, which is the currently developed non-Microsoft alternative to the old MS-DOS. Phil's Computer Lab had a recent video on it too, and found that most games are compatible, but to my surprise, not Ultima 7. I'm very shocked this has not been sorted out yet.
Use Exodus for it. Not Exodus. Or in fact, use Exodus as well. You can use Exodus, though. That's confusing. Quwyll and Quwyll. Exodus and Exodus.
The re-implemented engine will run in FreeDOS, and you can get your Ultima 7 that way?
Oh, no. The re-implemented engine works in Windows.
Then that won't help you in FreeDOS.
Yeah.
Anyway, Mr. Floppy has been officially announced. The amazing Rob Smith has made a floppy drive interface so that Mr. can use a real floppy drive properly. Initially, for the Amiga core only, it passes copy protection checks, and it even has that familiar tick sound. So he's also added support to Mr. for more Amiga disk formats at the same time. Currently, you need to use his modified core to get it working, but hopefully it'll become mainstream Mr. soon. Thanks, Arnold Jot.
There's a new EXO release. EXO Demo Scene 2.1 has just been released. Dutch Magic lets us know of a massive, he's submitted the subreddit, he's also one of the guys behind it, a massive update to the project that now provides, it always did, it It's an easy-to-use package to see notoriously difficult things to emulate demos. So there are now 2,424 DOS demos on it. I didn't know there were 2,400 DOS demos, but there are now 2,424 DOS demos on it. I always find it difficult to get demos to work for DOS because they were targeting every single inch they could get out of a machine at that particular point, and then a few years later that stuff would stop working. So this is a fantastic way to see some art.
And Dr. Local links us to an article about how Gen Z and younger adults are embracing iPods again. So the media and tech ending up in the hands of people that didn't use them the first time around. These articles seem to be going around these past few weeks.
It's definitely a theme. There was another one about Gen Z embracing DVDs, and again, they may be too young to really. Is it like us on records? I don't know.
Indigo Prime has the sad news that Rob Grant, the co-creator of Red Dwarf, a sitcom that for some reason resonated so well with most of us, has passed away.
Yeah, there was. I mean, there was lots of retro references in Red Dwarf, so it's clear that was somehow aligned to us. It's a very sad thing. Red Dwarf is fantastic. It was such a core thing for me when I was growing up.
Same, yeah.
Not content with one appearance, Rob Smith is also the inventor of a real floating lemming to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the game. Now, don't worry, the word real here doesn't mean it's an actual furry rodent being tortured. It means it's a real physical device. Geordie Jedi has linked us to Rob's video where he shows us how he made the device, where his lemming really does actually float, all to the tune of one of the tunes from the game. Absolutely amazing. Hello, Rob Smith.
And if you'd like to submit stories like these, upvote them, or hey, even downvote them, all's fair in love and war. Reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
I've got a bit of a quad damage of stories for you today, but let's start with the main feature, which is a new game for modern PCs called QUOD, but QUOD. Why are we covering a modern game? Well, because it's been made as part of a coding challenge. It's a first-person shooter in the style of Quake, but it's been made using only 64 kilobytes of memory, or it compresses down to 64K. This story on hackaday.com is penned by Tyler August and shared with us by Okyam894. According to the story, coder David, or his online username is DaveUK, D-A-I-V UK, has created this low-poly, fully texture-mapped game using some very interesting methods. The project began 10 years ago, but most of the completion was done in the last 12 months. David tasked himself with making a 64K game because he was into the modern demo scene, but he became obsessed with the 64K category. In fact, in his own video on the topic, where he explains how he's put this thing together, David first has to explain what a kilobyte is, because we just don't think in terms that small anymore. It's all megabytes. Well, I don't think even the kids these days talk about megabytes. It's gigabytes and terabytes. What did David manage to create? Well, he's literally created a multi-leveled Quake-like game with multiple enemies, different enemy types, new weapons, different weapons, textures, shading, sounds, everything you'd expect in a first-person shooter, basically. How has he done this? Well, for that, keeping in mind, I'm not a coder. Dave's not a coder. Jason, you're a coder? No, we're all shaking our heads here. So go and watch his video on the topic.
He used magic.
He used black magic. Probably sacrificed something on a full moon. No, go and listen to an actual coder talking about how he made his own game in his own video, because he does a great job of breaking it down. But he details not only how he created the code, but how he created low poly models in Blender, first and foremost, but he also created his own tools for some of the graphics, the texture maps, and the sounds, so that essentially he could procedurally generate some of the elements from smaller existing reusable parts. The only way I can fathom, sort of relate to this is, like I said earlier, I used to mess about and shoot 'em up construction kit, and you would reuse the same sample, but you played at different speeds, so it sounded like a completely different sound. Or in the case of a sprite, you might flip it around or whatever, so that it became something else. So he's playing those kind of tricks, which is that's what I like about this kind of project. 64K, as we all know, is a target for the best known micro of all time, the C64. So while he's creating a game for a modern PC, he's kind of having to employ the same tricks as devs had to use back in the days of yore, but just in an entirely new way. And of course, with new generation hardware to pull it apart and make it work. The levels were built in Trench Broom because he wanted to actually design the levels rather than those be procedurally generated. So that's cool. But of course, he's also then applied some of his coding black magic to minimize the bytes used for the application of textures. The models he's made in Blender, this is really clever. So for a lot of the enemy characters, he's created the character, but he's created half of the character because then he's realized, well, he can just mirror the surfaces, and hey presto, you've got the other half. You only have to load. You basically have to load half the data, right, to create the whole model, which is great. His video goes into much more detail, so please do watch it. But guys, how cool is this? And what's the most impressive demo or game you've seen squeezed into a low memory count in the modern era or on the original micros from the 8 or 16-bit era? Jason?
Yeah. I mean, QUOD is objectively impressive, but I mean, you do need a modern spec PC in order to play it. So, right, it's retro in terms of feel, but not computing payload. Yeah, I mean, like it needs an 8 gigabyte memory machine. It just the executable can fit into 64K of space. But as to your question, yeah, I mean, there's so much great stuff that's being done in constrained byte count or the really popular 10-line basic contests. My knowledge really only scratches the surface. We'll be hearing more about 10-line basic, I hope, in a matter of weeks when we have one of its big proponents on as a guest. I've seen some very playable Pac-Man clones done in 512 bytes, like Pillman. There's lots of extremely tiny chess programs that are fully rules compliant. And then even, again, come back to the Atari 2600. There are some of those early carts that are 2K of ROM and a 128-byte machine, and they still pack in a lot of gameplay and a lot of variations, like the original pack-in combat cartridge. A lot of interesting demos for machines, in the sub 1 kilobyte range. I always think of A Mind is Born by LFT for the Commodore 64. It's a 256-byte demo. It has a weird, glitchy sense of style to it. It has something you could call kind of a thumping music track. It has a defined ending. A lot of really, really impressive stuff being done in very, very, very tight spaces.
Yeah, the really low byte count demos, sometimes it's almost that there's something otherworldly about them, the way they use glitches and so on. It's almost a cosmic horror about them. This is definitely the kind of stuff you see in a revision. It's really cool. It isn't possible in older systems. I don't think you'll be able to see this in a CPC or a C64. It's utilizing resources and so on that exist already. The goal is to compact this ecosystem down to 64 kilobyte that will expand to a full game. It's amazing. It's also good that he's made it a good game rather than a proof of concept. It would have been enough just to say, look, this is a game that you can technically play, but no, he's actually done level design. It really matters for the FPS's stand or fall in the level design, of course. But even going back to when these shooters first came out, they had way less fidelity than this and took up massively more space than 64 kilobytes, even back then. But I do like that it encourages smooth, simple game design and not the bloated cutscene, quick time event stuff we have now, which is an anathema of gaming, what should be. As for my favourite kind of this, you're surprised it fits. It's a game mentioned recently for the Amstrad CPC, 2013, I think it was made, called Relentless. Relentless is a shooter, and it's in 16 kilobytes. The Amstrad CPC could hold a lot more than that, but it's in 16 kilobytes. It's a full, complete game. The sound's great on it. The graphics are absolutely amazing for the CPC, and it fits in there just quite nicely. And unless you were told it was only 16 kilobytes, you'd have no reason to believe it was a compressed game like that.
I actually played QUOD just so I could give Duncan some overlay footage for the YouTube version of this podcast. And I forgot why I was playing it. I just played it. It's a playable game, right? It's just got up to level 3, and now I want to get to level 4. I assume there is one, and I'm playing it like it's Quake. It's fantastic. And given this is an first-person shooter, it gives me an excuse to squeeze in a mention for 3 other stories. So the first story in this QUOD was QUOD, which we've already talked about. The second one is a story posted by Dopey Dragon Games. Hi, Zach. Zach links us to Quake Jam 3, which is a community project that essentially delivers a total conversion pack for the Quake engine. And you know how I love my mapping projects. This includes new arsenal of weapons, new monsters, and 77 new maps. So we'll put
77.
the link. 77, yeah. So we'll drop the link to the project page, which includes download links as well. Number 3 is Unreal Tournament 2004 is now downloadable for free with the blessing of Epic, and that was shared with us by Squelch411. And we did cover this in briefs last week, but even though I own the original DVD set, I chose to download this new version just to test it. And it's really cool. I think it's cool that Epic have blessed this, first and foremost. Keep in mind, this is still not abandonware. Epic still own the IP. They've just said you can go ahead with this project, right? That's the difference. But it now supports 16:9 screen resolutions, which is the first. And you can play online, and it filters down to known active servers. And you can add your own maps if you have them, which brings me to the fourth part of my QUOD Damage story, which I'll drop a link in the show notes to where you can download my Laser Quest Tunbridge Wells maps for Unreal Tournament. They actually work in Unreal Tournament 2003 and 2004. There's two types of maps. One, you just play an Insta-Jib mutator on Deathmatch, so it feels more like playing Laser Quest. And the other one, I've put weapon drops and everything in, and health spots and all that. So you can play it just as traditional Unreal Tournament. I did have some feedback from a guy who used to repair the Laser Quest equipment, including at the Tunbridge Wells Arena, and he said it brought back memories, and that's all I ever hope to do. It's now time for our community question of the week, and last week's question was, what retro tech would you try to revive with $1 billion research and development budget? And Duncan, for his 50th birthday, quite rightly said, Amiga! Windows is dying, the time is right. Can't argue with that.
I'm not allowed to argue with that, I think.
He's not allowed to argue with that. Who had the top answer? Who had the second answer? Because Duncan's is the top.
Jeff Mendoza, and in fact, also extension secret 941 said CRT monitors. Jeff says, I just think they're neat. Yeah, I love CRTs.
Fatter Agnes 8375 said all-in-one hi-fi systems, not the top quality separates of the 80s and 90s. I'm talking the ones with a 5-disc CD tray, twin tape decks, and loads of over-the-top claims about wattage plastered all over it, and a pretty LED graphic equalizer front panel, and so on and so forth. I'm on board.
Yeah,
do it, and make them a Bluetooth speaker at the same time, because that's what you do these days.
Yeah, you old with your new. Yeah.
No blue
optical
LEDs
input
though.
No blue LEDs everywhere.
Those are tough.
Can you imagine you got that home and you thought this looks great, and you turned it on, and a blue LED comes on? Oh,
yeah. Colin the activist says Whopper, so that he can be prepared for World War III. Fair enough.
There's some other interesting answers. Beep Fixer, a joint venture effort like the 3DO or MSX, where the specs are defined and fixed. Honestly, the gaming market is so ready for it. Interesting idea.
Yeah. Conix multi-system. For the chair. Light guns for modern screens. That's been done.
Holographic arcade games. The time is right for that, surely, because the tech has improved, I think. Maybe.
It's Me Thyroid says I'll be the third person saying CRTs. I think you're the fourth. It's Me Thyroid. I think you're the fourth. OS2. Least popular answer at the moment, OS2.
I'm going to give it an upvote. That's now got one upvote.
Thank you.
There we are. OS2 has been
Thank you,
saved by Chris. Do we have a question for this week?
We do. Nobody said anything about it, so I'm going to read it out. So QUOD is a full Quake experience in 64K. What tiny piece of software, past or present, impresses you the most?
Where would you go to submit an answer to that, Chris?
I reckon you go to the subreddit, which is on reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro.
That's right.
/Patreon
/ yeah.
Media Addict.
Thank you for joining us this week, Twirlers. We'll be back next week. And I'm waving.
And we'll be back 30 minits later or earlier if you're Chris.
But at the same
time for you.
No,
it only affects
notice
us.
a difference. Don't pay attention to him.
We'll just
same place, same back time.
We'll look refreshed, rested.
I'm so going to log in at the wrong time.
Waving like ninnies. Here we go.
Bye.
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 This Week in Retro was written and presented by Chris from 005 AGIMA, Jason from the Retro Adventurers, and Dave. It was edited by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcast app, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/This Week in Retro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. Please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.